Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Story 1. So, I work part time as a freelance dog trainer while finishing up my psychology degree. I work with animals and help families, especially those with special needs kids. My little brother has autism, so I know how much service and support animals can mean to families dealing with challenges. That Tuesday, I was at Riverside Park doing some training sessions with clients. I'd wrapped up my morning appointments and decided to grab lunch at one of the picnic tables when I noticed this stressed looking woman sitting on a bench nearby. She had a beautiful golden retriever wearing a bright blue vest that clearly marked him as a support animal. Her son, maybe 8 or 9 years old, was having what looked like an anxiety attack. The kid was breathing heavily and making these distressing whimpering sounds. Being someone who understands these situations, I walked over to see if I could help. The woman looked up at me with exhausted eyes. I asked if everything was okay and mentioned that I work with support animals and had noticed her son seemed distressed. She thanked me for asking and explained that her son was having one of his episodes. The new school environment had been really triggering his anxiety lately. She pointed to the golden retriever and told me he was their support dog. She said he usually helped calm her son down, but today had been rough. I asked what the dog's name was. She told me the dog was called Buddy and that her son was also having a hard time adjusting to his new medication. The doctor had said it might take a few weeks to balance out. I watched when Buddy moved closer to the boy, placing his head gently on the kid's lap. The child's breathing started to slow down slightly. It was beautiful to see the bond between them. That's when this woman came walking over. Middle-aged, wearing expensive workout clothes, and radiating the kind of energy that screams trouble. She had this entitled swagger and was already talking before she even reached us. Karen demanded that she needed that dog. We both turned to stare at her, confused. The woman asked what she meant. Karen explained that her daughter had been begging her for a golden retriever exactly like that one. She said she'd been looking everywhere and hadn't found one that pretty. She asked how much the woman wanted for him. I told Karen that it was a certified support animal and wasn't for sale. Karen responded that she didn't care what kind of dog he was and that everything had a price. She told us to name it. The woman holding her son looked stunned. She explained that the dog wasn't a pet but a medical necessity for her son. She said he had severe anxiety and panic disorders and that she couldn't just sell him. Karen dismissed this, saying she was sure the kid would get over whatever problems he had because kids are resilient. She said her daughter really wanted a dog like this, and she always gave her what she wanted. The audacity was breathtaking. I told her she couldn't be serious and that this animal provided essential medical support. Karen rolled her eyes and said not to be so dramatic, claiming it was just anxiety. She said when she was a kid, they just told anxious children to get over it. She complained that all this coddling nowadays was ridiculous. The woman's son was still struggling to breathe properly, and hearing this conversation was clearly making things worse for him. His mother pleaded with Karen to stop because she was upsetting her son even more. She said they needed some space. Karen refused to leave and declared she wasn't going anywhere until the woman sold her that dog. She bragged that she was prepared to pay very well. I told her the answer was no and to please leave them alone. Karen snapped at me, asking who had asked me and saying this was between her and the other woman. She told me to mind my own business. Karen then did something that made my blood boil. She actually reached down and tried to grab Buddy's leash right out of the woman's hands. The woman shouted at her not to touch him and to get away from them. Karen declared that if the woman wouldn't sell him, she'd just take him. She claimed that clearly the woman didn't deserve such a beautiful animal if she wouldn't even consider a reasonable offer. That's when I stepped directly between Karen and the family. I told her to back off right then and accused her of harassing these people and attempting to steal a medical support animal. Karen protested that she wasn't stealing anything because she had offered to pay. I pointed out that they had said no multiple times and that now she was trying to physically take their dog, which was theft. Karen claimed I had no authority there and demanded to speak to someone in charge. I said that was a great idea and suggested we call park security. I pulled out my phone, but Karen snatched it right out of my hands and threw it on the ground. She yelled that no one was calling anyone until she got the dog. Now I was furious. She'd crossed way too many lines. I accused her of assaulting me and destroying my property. That's when the park security guard showed up. Someone else had already called about the disturbance. He asked what the problem was. Karen immediately switched tactics and put on this sweet, innocent voice. She told the officer she was thankful he was there and claimed that we had been harassing her and refusing to sell her our dog. She said she had made a very generous offer and that we had been rude. The security guard asked if this was true. The woman with the support dog said no and explained that Karen had approached them demanding to buy their son's support animal. She told him that when they refused, Karen became aggressive and tried to grab the dog's leash. She also mentioned that Karen had thrown my phone on the ground. The security guard looked at Karen, then at the clearly distressed child with a support dog, then at my cracked phone on the pavement. He asked if that was a certified support animal. The woman confirmed it was and offered to show him the dog's certification and her son's medical documentation. Karen interrupted, insisting that it didn't matter because she needed that dog more than they did. The security guard explained that she couldn't demand to purchase someone's medical support animal. He said that would be like demanding to buy someone's wheelchair. Karen argued that it was different. The security guard told her no, it wasn't. He said from what he could see, she had also destroyed my property and had been physically aggressive. Karen protested that she had barely touched my phone and claimed she wasn't aggressive, just trying to get our attention. The security guard told her he needed her to calm down and step away from us. Karen refused and declared that this was a public park and she had every right to be there. The guard acknowledged that she had a right to be there, but explained that she didn't have a right to harass other visitors or destroy property. That's when Karen lost it. She asked if he knew who she was and bragged that her husband was a lawyer. She threatened to have all of our jobs and claimed this was discrimination against her because she was successful and could afford nice things. The security guard told her that her financial status had nothing to do with the situation. Karen demanded to speak to his supervisor and insisted that she wanted us arrested for refusing to cooperate with her. The guard told her she needed to lower her voice and step back. Instead of complying, Karen lunged toward the woman and child, trying to grab Buddy's leash again. The security guard immediately stepped in and grabbed Karen's arm. He announced that she was under arrest for assault, harassment, and destruction of property. Karen screamed that he couldn't arrest her because she was the victim. When the security guard was putting handcuffs on Karen, she started screaming at the top of her lungs. She yelled about police brutality and claimed she was being persecuted for trying to help her daughter. She threatened that we were all going to pay for this. But here's where it gets good. When Karen was being led away in handcuffs, still screaming threats, another park visitor approached us. He introduced himself as Officer Johnson and said he was an off-duty police officer who had witnessed the entire incident. He asked if we wanted to press charges for assault and destruction of property. I said yes. The woman with the support dog agreed, saying that Karen had terrified her son and tried to steal his support dog. Officer Johnson said he'd be happy to provide a witness statement and mentioned that he had recorded part of the incident on his phone when he saw things escalating. Karen, who was now sitting in the back of the security vehicle, heard this through the open window. She yelled that recording her was illegal and that he couldn't do it without permission. Officer Johnson explained that in a public park, he could record incidents for safety and legal purposes. Karen's husband, the lawyer she kept threatening us with, showed up about 20 minutes later. Instead of the dramatic rescue Karen was probably expecting, he looked mortified. He apologized about his wife's behavior and said it was unacceptable. He approached us and apologized personally, offering to pay for my broken phone and asking if there was anything else he could do to make up for Karen's actions. He explained that she had been having some issues lately, but said that was no excuse for her behavior. He promised to make sure she got the help she needed. The woman with the support dog was finally able to calm her son down with Buddy's help. The whole incident had been traumatic for the kid, but having his support animal there made all the difference in his recovery. She thanked me for standing up for them and said she didn't know what would have happened if I hadn't been there. I told her of course I would help and that nobody should have to deal with that kind of harassment, especially when they were just trying to help their child. Later I found out that Karen was charged with assault, harassment, destruction of property, and attempted theft. Her husband enrolled her in anger management classes and community service. The woman with the support dog and I became friends after that incident. I ended up helping her train a second support animal for her son when he got older, and she referred several other families to my training services. Story 2. I worked at this small movie theater during college, and let me tell you, it was usually a pretty decent gig. The pay wasn't amazing, but the work was straightforward and most of my coworkers were cool. I started there as an usher when I was 19, mostly working weekends and some weekday evenings around my class schedule. The owner was this older guy who seemed fair enough, and the manager actually knew how to run the place without being a complete pain. Everything changed when we found out the owner's daughter was getting hired. I'd seen her around before. She was this woman in her mid-40s who looked like she'd been through a blender. All frizzy brown hair that never seemed to be combed, probably weighed about 80 pounds soaking wet, and had this permanent scowl on her face. She'd been coming to the theater for months just hanging around because she didn't have anywhere else to go. Any job she managed to get, she'd lose within weeks. The staff all knew her and nobody could stand her. She acted like she owned the place, which technically I guess her dad did, but she'd boss everyone around and threaten to run to daddy if anyone gave her attitude back. We were all walking on eggshells whenever she showed up. When the owner told us she was getting a job with us, you could feel the morale just tank. Thankfully, he wasn't completely stupid about it. He knew if he made her a manager, every single person would quit on the spot. So he stuck her in the box office where she could sell tickets and hopefully stay out of everyone's way. The staff had all sorts of names for her. Some people called her the Beast. Others went with the Troll or the Banshee. My personal favorite was the Wicked Witch of the box office, though some people just called her Satan and left it at that. She didn't limit her nastiness to just the employees either. We had this unwritten rule that immediate family members of staff could come watch movies for free. One of my coworkers had this really nice dad who'd come in sometimes, super friendly guy, always polite to everyone. But she would go off on him for no reason at all, just being completely rude and nasty. The crazy part? She'd then go drop off her resume at his wife's law firm trying to get a paralegal job. The dad told us later that she probably would have gotten hired if she hadn't been such a witch to him. She kept doing this, getting paralegal jobs, getting fired within a month, then coming back to work weekends at the theater. One time, a law firm actually threatened to sue her because she wouldn't stop calling them after they let her go. The day everything exploded was a Saturday from hell. 2 people called out sick, leaving us completely understaffed right when we were getting slammed with customers. Normally I worked as an usher, but I got stuck in the box office with her because I was fast at handling long lines, and I was one of the few people who could work with her without completely losing it. I was already having a rough day because I'd been forced to work a double shift to cover for one of the people who called out. My patience was running thin, but I was trying to keep it together. After we finally got through the rush and the lobby cleared out, a couple of employees stepped outside for a smoke break. That's when she started. She demanded to know where the employees thought they were going and told them they still had work to do inside. When one of them explained they were just taking a quick smoke break after working hard all day, she snapped back that it wasn't her problem, and they needed to get back inside and do their jobs. I could see the employees getting frustrated, and honestly, I'd had enough. I turned to her and tried to keep my voice calm while telling her it had been a long day for everyone and asking her to please lay off. She looked at me and started going on about how she didn't think any of us understood what work actually meant. She said the performance around there had been absolutely pathetic all day. That's when something in me just snapped. The whole exchange gets a bit blurry because I was getting angrier by the second when she kept running her mouth. But the next thing I knew, I was shouting at the top of my lungs, telling her to screw off. I stormed out of the box office so fast I think I left skid marks. Everyone in the lobby just stared at me with their jaws hanging open. Most of them had never seen me lose my temper, especially not at her. I was shaking, I was so mad. I went straight upstairs to the manager's office, still visibly trembling from anger. Even he was shocked to see me in that state. He immediately got on the phone with the owner to tell him what happened with his daughter. The manager explained that she had finally pushed one of the good employees too far and that the owner needed to deal with this situation. The owner said he'd have a talk with her the next day. We figured she was going to try to throw me and everyone else under the bus, so I volunteered to stay until midnight with another employee to do the most thorough cleaning job possible. We scrubbed the kitchen spotless, mopped and vacuumed the entire lobby, and made sure everything was perfect. By the time we left at midnight, the place looked better than it had in months. The next day, the owner showed up with his daughter trailing behind him. They both went up to his office and stayed there for about an hour while the rest of us tried to work. and wondered what was happening. We kept looking up at the office, trying to figure out if we were all about to get fired. Finally, we saw her storm down the stairs and walk straight out the door without saying a word to anyone. Turns out she'd been suspended for 2 weeks. I never even got in trouble, though they did try to implement some rule about not using profanity in the lobby. My bad. When she came back after her suspension, she gave me the silent treatment for another 2 weeks. The funny thing was, it never occurred to her that I didn't want her talking to me anyway. It was actually the most peaceful 2 weeks I'd had at that job. I eventually quit when I found a better paying position elsewhere. The manager told me later that the owner was eventually forced to fire his own daughter because she kept causing problems with the staff. The final straw came when she started harassing the mother of another employee. The mother complained to the owner and casually mentioned that this level of harassment could lead to a lawsuit. Even after getting fired, she'd still come in regularly to watch movies and get free concessions since Daddy still owned the place. That gravy train ended when the owner finally sold the theater. Last I heard, she'd been living with her older sister but got kicked out when she yelled at the nanny, and the nanny recorded the whole thing. Why didn't any of us think to do that when we worked with her? I work for a law firm now myself, and whenever they mention they're looking to hire paralegals, I keep a very wary eye out. Story 3. I work as a Canadian Reserve soldier part-time. This means training 1 evening per week and 2 weekend exercises every month. My civilian job is in IT support, which pays the bills, but the military training keeps me grounded and gives me purpose. This weekend had been brutal. We'd just completed one of the most challenging exercises I'd experienced since joining the reserves. It started with a 3-kilometer ruck march from our bus drop-off point to the training field, carrying full packs in the freezing cold. The temperature had dropped well below zero, and we spent the entire weekend sleeping in makeshift shelters called hooches. During the day, we ran section and platoon attack drills, and at night, we practiced navigation and patrol training in complete darkness. By Sunday evening, I was completely exhausted. My body ached from the physical demands, and my stomach was growling after 2 days of army rations and field food. All I could think about was getting a proper meal before heading home to collapse into my own bed. That's when I remembered my friend's burger shop. My buddy from high school works at his father's small restaurant. It's not much to look at from the outside, just a tiny hole-in-the-wall place tucked between a laundromat and a used bookstore. But his dad makes everything from scratch, hand-forming each patty and using fresh ingredients. I'd been there a few times before, and honestly, they serve the best burgers I've ever tasted. When I walked in around 4 in the afternoon, the place was practically empty. My friend told me it had been a slow day, with only a small rush during lunch hour. Since we hadn't seen each other in weeks, he invited me to sit in the employee lounge behind the counter while I ate. The lounge was tucked away from the main entrance, but once customers approached the counter, they could see straight back into it. I figured it would be nice to catch up while I enjoyed my meal. I ordered their signature bacon cheeseburger with extra pickles and settled into one of the plastic chairs in the back area. My friend was busy cleaning the grill and restocking supplies while we talked about my weekend training. I was about halfway through my burger, finally starting to feel human again, when I heard the front door chime. A man walked in with 2 young girls, probably around 8 and 10 years old. They looked around the empty restaurant for a moment before the father called out, asking if anyone was there since the sign said they were open. My friend quickly wiped his hands and came around the corner from where he'd been organizing inventory. He apologized for not being at the counter immediately and asked what he could get for them. The father ordered a double bacon matzo burger with fries for himself and kitty cheesy burgers for each of his daughters. He said that they wanted to eat in the restaurant. My friend rang up the order and told him the total would be $16.67, with the food ready in about 10 to 15 minutes. The father seemed annoyed by the wait time and suggested that maybe if my friend got his coworker to help, pointing directly at me in the lounge, the order would be done faster. I nearly choked on my bite of burger, having no idea what he was talking about. My friend started to explain that I wasn't an employee, but the father cut him off completely. He began yelling at me, calling me over to help with the paying customer. I just sat there completely bewildered with a mouthful of food and no clue why the stranger was shouting at me. My friend tried again to explain that I didn't work there and was just a close friend visiting. The father refused to believe this, saying that he knew how food workers covered for each other and that he wouldn't be fooled. He demanded that I come help my buddy since he and his daughters were supposedly starving. I put down my burger and walked over to the counter, thinking maybe if I explained the situation clearly, this misunderstanding would clear up quickly. I told him honestly that I really didn't work there, that I wasn't a burger jockey, but just another paying customer. I even mentioned that I probably wasn't qualified to make food for him to eat. The father's response was to call me pathetic and absolutely lazy for refusing to come off my break to make one simple order. I was stunned by his reaction. Here I was, still wearing my combat boots and smelling like campfire smoke from sleeping outdoors all weekend, trying to enjoy my first decent meal in days. And this complete stranger was calling me lazy for not working at a job I didn't even have. My friend had been working frantically to prepare the order while this conversation was happening. The man's behavior was clearly making him uncomfortable, especially with the two little girls standing there, watching their father berate a stranger. My friend slammed a large brown paper bag down on the counter and announced that the order was ready to go. He told the father that his behavior toward me was inappropriate, especially in front of his children, and asked him to take his food and leave. The father protested that he had ordered the food to eat inside the restaurant. My friend acknowledged this, but explained that since the man had made a jerk of himself, he would much rather not have him in the establishment. He told him to please leave. The man grabbed the bag roughly, nearly knocking over the napkin dispenser in the process. When he walked toward the door with his daughters hurrying to keep up, he continued complaining loudly about slow and rude service, threatening never to return. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. After they left, my friend and I just looked at each other. I'd encountered some difficult people during my customer service days in college, but nothing quite like this. The man had been so convinced that I worked there, despite multiple explanations to the contrary, that he'd worked himself into a rage over absolutely nothing. My friend apologized profusely, but I told him he'd handled it perfectly. He'd stood up for me when a stranger was being unreasonable, and he'd protected his business by refusing to tolerate abusive behavior. I finished my burger in peace, and we spent the rest of the evening laughing about the absurdity of the situation. The next week, my friend called to tell me the rest of the story. Apparently, the angry customer had left negative reviews on multiple websites, claiming the staff was lazy and rude. But here's the satisfying part. My friend's dad had security cameras throughout the restaurant. When other potential customers started asking about the negative reviews, they pulled the footage and posted a response showing exactly what had happened. The video clearly showed me sitting in civilian clothes in the employee area, the man's aggressive behavior, and my friend's professional handling of the situation. The negative reviews were quickly overwhelmed by supportive comments from regular customers who knew the family and their business. Several people even mentioned they'd be coming by to support them after seeing how well they'd handled an unreasonable customer. Business actually picked up in the following weeks. The entitled customer never came back, which was probably for the best because I doubt he would have been welcomed back anyway.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.